Emergency medicine is a relative newcomer to the overall healthcare picture, just barely 50 years old. Hospital architects have typically placed the emergency department at the rear of the hospital, but now we're beginning to see it as the hospital's front door. As with other facets of healthcare, there are questions concerning the future. Hello, I'm Roger Downey, the moderator of this special program hosted by GlobalMed. In search of answers, we've invited 4 emergency medicine physicians and a medical student who represents the next generation of providers to be part of this program. Their credentials are impressive, and any brief introduction merely scratches the surface. Dr. Richardo Martinez has served in senior roles in academics, government, and business. This includes serving on the faculty of Emory University School of Medicine and Stanford University School of Medicine. As an executive with the Schumacher Group, he helped oversee the nation's 3rd largest emergency medicine practice management company with more than 170 hospitals in 22 states. He spent 5 years as the administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And since 1988, he has been the senior medical advisor to the National Football League Super Bowl. Welcome, Dr. Martinez.
Thank you.
Dr. Phil Johnson is the son of American missionaries, and due to his parents' vocation, grew up in the Himalaya Mountains and Sindh deserts of Pakistan. From his parents, he developed an interest in healthcare that led him to Northwestern University, where he received his medical degree. After his internship at the University of Arizona, he began his practice in underserved areas of Arizona for Indian Health Services. He returned to Pakistan as a Fulbright scholar and set up postgraduate training programs at Aga Khan University Medical School in Karachi. When Arizona drew him home, he began work as an emergency physician at Summit Healthcare in the White Mountain community of Show Low, where he is now the emergency room medical director and chair of the emergency department. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Dr. Robert Galli's medical career has taken him to foreign countries too. From northern New Jersey, where he grew up, to Brazil as a high school exchange student, to College de Europe studying European unification, to Yale University School of Medicine for his medical education. His tour of emergency departments began in Los Angeles at the UCLA Medical Center, where he became a member of the medical school faculty. He moved to the University of Mississippi Medical Center, where he was chairman of the Emergency Medicine Academic Program. Now he is in charge of the newest program for the university's Department of Emergency Medicine, TelEmergency, a unique training program for nurse practitioners implementing telemedicine systems in the emergency department. Welcome, Dr. Galli. And we have another world traveler joining us from Crete. Dr. Brendan Carr is an associate professor of emergency medicine and epidemiology at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, where he completed his residency in emergency medicine and a fellowship in trauma and surgical critical care. He received formal training in research methods from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Clinical Scholars Program. Dr. Carr is a senior scholar in the Center for Clinical Epidemiology and Biostatistics and a senior fellow in the Leonard Davis Institute of Health Economics. He also serves as the co-director of the Center for Emergency Care Policy and Research and the curriculum director for the Emergency Care Research Fellowship at Penn. We want to welcome Dr. Carr all the way from Crete. We've also asked Jordan Magruder to join us today. Jordan is a medical student at St. George's University School of Medicine on Grenada. She has just finished her academic year and hopes to be a member of the graduating class of 2017. And she would like to be an emergency medicine physician when she completes her courses and her training. I want to welcome you too, Jordan. Again, these are only brief introductions. There is considerably more information beyond these credits. For this program, we want to take advantage of their expertise and experience to discuss the future of emergency medicine and the role telemedicine technologies can and will play in the emergency department of the now and the near future. On my left are the 2 men considered to be visionaries in technologies that provide access to health care for better outcomes while helping to control unnecessary health care costs. Joel Barthelemy is the founding and managing director of GlobalMed. He started the company now considered the worldwide industry leader in telemedicine in 2002. In 2009, the Veterans Administration, in the largest rollout of telemedicine equipment, chose GlobalMed Solutions for its medical centers and community-based outpatient clinics. That program has been so successful in saving taxpayer money, the VA has waived copays for veterans who see their physicians remotely. Joel and longtime colleague and friend Mike Harris designed these systems. Mike is Director of Research and Development for GlobalMed. He has been designing hardware and software systems for 30 years. And the products that GlobalMed offers today are a direct result of his insight and inspiration. Together, these two men have put together the new generation of healthcare delivery systems that are leading the way in transforming healthcare in the United States and around the world. Now, what we want to do is look at today's problems in delivering healthcare and share some ideas that will shape our healthcare system for years to come. Earlier today, the doctors and GlobalMed staff spent 2 hours in a wide-ranging informal conversation. And based on that conversation, we asked our panel of physicians to select the 3 most important issues or topics involving the emergency department and rank them in importance. The number one, as you gentlemen and ladies chose, was the care culture in the ER and the specialist. Let's begin with you, Dr. Martinez. Where do you see the problem?
Well, you know, a lot of patients access the emergency department because they have an acute episode, acute problem. What we found is that the primary care or the specialist offices are often full, and so they come there for the original evaluation. However, that does not mean that they have definitive care done, that we may need to collaborate with those specialists or have some follow-up with those specialists. Unfortunately, what we're finding is that there's a real maldistribution of specialists, maybe more in the bigger cities, less in the more rural environments. So we spend a lot of time and effort as emergency physicians trying to coordinate that care and make sure that our patients are taken care of. What's really nice about the emergence of telemedicine is that it allows cognitive decision making to actually move from us sending the patient upstream to back to the patient bedside. You've seen that begin to occur in things like strokes and others, but we really see the real value for that for the things that we spend a lot of our time on. Headaches, pulmonary issues, chest pain, abdominal pain. That's where we think a lot of non-productive time is spent at the detriment of the patient and the patients waiting to be seen.
Of course, jump in any time you feel that you want to make a comment, but let's talk to Dr. Johnson and Dr. Galli. What about the volume of patients? Is that an issue as well that perhaps makes it very difficult to work in the emergency department at certain times of the day or night?
Yeah, volume's always a problem. The volume in an emergency room peaks about between 10 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock the next morning. And having worked many shifts this last week, you finish the shift just totally dead, tired yourself, and you're constantly trying to get to the next patient because the door to provider time is the most important time to provide patient satisfaction, and we're judged on that. And quite honestly, I want my patients to like me, and I want to provide the absolute best care possible. So through input is a huge issue in every emergency room, and trying to get people from the waiting room in to be seen and where they need to be is a constant challenge for every physician and every emergency room director. So that is a lot of pressure, and the telemedicine piece of that can offload a lot of that to providing help where you need it.
We mentioned TelEmergency, Dr. Galli, and your program is sort of, cutting edge is what I'm trying to say. It's cutting edge in the sense that you're using nurse practitioners in that sense. Tell us a little about that program.
Well, what you find in many areas, and certainly I found in Mississippi, is an inability to recruit physicians to staff emergency departments. What you were finding is many of these small hospitals have literally 2 physicians that are on the medical staff, and to ask them to see clinic patients during the day and then staff the emergency department through the night is really asking a little bit too much. What we were finding is that nurse practitioners were staffing emergency departments by themselves, kind of with the idea that you should let old Doc Jones sleep through the night, even though that was their backup. As a result, we were getting calls with frantic NPs who are well trained to cover clinic patients, but not necessarily true critical emergencies. And so we established a program where we could help them with some of the approach to the emergency patient, and then through telemedicine put a board certified emergency physician in that department, combining therefore the excellent hands-on care of the nurse practitioner with the board certified expertise of the emergency physician. We've been doing it for 10 years, seen a little over 400,000 patients now, and it's working very nicely.
Dr. Carr, you've done, your specialty in a sense is not only emergency medicine, but the research involved in probably improving care that we need to look at because of the way things are moving. Not only in the fact that we have fewer physicians, more patients showing up in emergency rooms, but also because of the way the government may soon treat medicine here in this country. So what can you add to that aspect of emergency medicine problems with specialties?
I would add two things. I would add in part the fact that we have tolerated for a very long time different outcomes during our off hours, our nights and our weekends, than during our daytime hours. The resources and capabilities at many hospitals during the day are very different than the resources and capabilities at nighttime. If you need many of the subspecialists that you might count on having during the daytime off hours, it's a much more difficult arrangement to make that happen. Dr. Martinez referred to a mismatch before, this mismatch between what I need to provide the best possible care and what my hospital administrators and my hospital staff can provide for me can be, I think, in some ways, in many ways, can be helped by the creation of telemedical networks. One subspecialist, urologist, could cover multiple hospitals. 6 or 8 or 10 hospitals in a region. They might only get called a handful of times that night, but they know that it's their night to have some responsibility for that area, versus the system that we have now where 2 hospitals have someone on call for that specialty, but the other 6 or 8 hospitals in a town might not have somebody on call. There are a lot of clever ways that we can start to leverage some of the technology that's available now to help erase what has come to be known in outcomes circles as the weekend effect.
Jordan, given the description of the problems that you just heard from these 4 physicians who have put in years of work in the emergency department, does this encourage you? Does this mean that you want to meet that challenge? Because you say you want to be an emergency medicine doctor.
I think we have the resources today, whereas you guys have had to deal with it for the last few decades, and that's no longer an issue. So I see a lot of room for more efficiency in the ER, because from what I've seen working in the ER for the past couple of years is not a lot of it. So I don't know, there's definitely opportunities to take advantage of technology, and I think that this is the road to go. So,
well, as a matter of fact, part of the program that we had today was a discussion of technology that exists currently and what could be in the emergency room or in people's homes in the future. And that's why we've asked Joel and Mike to talk to us as well. So Joel, the whole idea behind GlobalMed from the very start has been to listen to people who work in healthcare and then develop programs and software and hardware, right?
That's correct, Roger. We have focused on filling need where need was great and not trying to create products where we think there's a need and trying to create demand for a product that really is not needed. So we've focused on technologies that would make a difference quickly. And some of our very early technologies were echo-canceling microphones, were web cameras that would allow for a lower cost, high quality image to be shared from a patient and to a doctor. As we've progressed along the path, we created technologies for pathology that would give the first high definition images from a microscope for frozen section labs, and we were very successful with that. But after a while of focusing on pathology and having a consult being done over a microphone and a web camera plus a high def camera to a neuropathologist, let's say, we found that the general practitioner and the intensivist within different service lines needed a camera to use to see the patient, a higher quality camera. And so Mike, in his experience of designing technologies for a long time, as we were sitting in a conference room one day and we were talking about the design of this high-def camera that was the size of a hockey puck on top of a microscope, he picked up the dry erase marker that he was writing on the board, the requirements of a camera, and he took that camera and he pointed it in my face and he said, I want to build a camera just like this. And that was probably 7 years ago. And that was our total exam camera. At the very beginning start of our successes literally in telemedicine was the exam camera. You mentioned the VA. The very first products the VA purchased from us were the very first 2 total exam cameras that they used. And the person that was running telehealth said, boy, if this camera is successful, we would see that we might buy hundreds of them. And so he got my attention and our company's attention. And he described, and the nurses described, and the doctors described, even the biotech people within the hospital described the issues that they had with current systems. And so we took their pain points and redesigned and redeveloped products, continuously tweaking them for them on a telemedicine exam station where they added their video conferencing systems from Polycom and Cisco versus basically a video cart that you tried to add medical devices to. We created a medical device system where we added cameras.
And this whole idea of being agnostic or vendor neutral when it came to providing products for already products that were in the hospitals, were being used in healthcare, Mike, that was really a decision point that launched this company.
It did. I mean, we had to look at a lot of different technologies, came across different digital interfaces, and finally selected an analog output simply because that's what the market was asking for the hardware codecs that were available at the VA at the time.
But then you advanced that. In a sense, you were looking 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road. And describe that process and what you were thinking of when you were designing that initial camera, where you were going to go next and that kind of thing.
The original camera was actually a digital camera, and as we got into it and developed it, we found that as you moved your hand, if you weren't running at least 60 frames a second, you got a lot of glare and just nasties on the screen. So we went with the analog camera just simply because at that time technology hadn't quite caught up to the digital formats. At the same time, as we got very familiar with a lot of the codecs out there, Polycom, Tandbergs, a lot of them were adapting to the new HDMI and DVI digital formats. So the requests coming back from the market was, I wish we just had a camera we could just plug straight into the codec. So we started on a venture several years ago to develop an extremely high definition 1080p camera that you could hold in your hand like that dry eraser.
Well, and interesting, and to his point there, which was great, the very first technology we came up with, that he came up with in his teams for an examination camera, was a digital version of the camera. But the market wasn't ready for it. We had to basically can that product and fill the need of an analog camera, because all of telemedicine 7 years ago was video conferencing. And so those codecs only took a third-party camera via S-video. That was the only way into the codec. And so we had to change in midstream and design a system that actually met the need of the market, not what we wanted to sell. Because he really believed that a digital camera did a much better job. But at the time, no one was ready.
Right. Well, is the market ready? Is the market ready for the next advancements in healthcare? I mean, obviously you want good quality medical instruments that work within your workflow and your processes. Are you ready for those?
Well, I got to tell you, the nice thing about healthcare right now is that pretty much everybody agrees it can't get a whole lot worse, right? I mean, there's the desire to when you look up against the mirror, a few years ago, anytime you said healthcare wasn't the best in the world, people got upset. But now we realize there's a lot of inefficiency. I think Jordan made that comment. Inefficiency. The systems that we have in place are sometimes ineffective with delays in care. We worry a lot about cost for what we're getting. And the nice thing is we've now grown up where we understand tablets and mobile phones and wireless. And so the idea of redesigning the system has come about. And emergency care is the perfect place to do that, because we're going to see a lot more people coming into the system. We have an aging population, and we find that the emergency department has gone, as you said, from the back door to the front door. Recent research shows, the RAND Corporation, that 80% of primary care physicians or private physicians will send their patient to the emergency department because that's the place that's best equipped for that. Now that means that the emergency physician has to try to weave together the resources they need, which may be in the hospital, may be elsewhere. If you look at what happens now, we move the patient. And in fact, one of the ways I got into this was running some emergency departments where we found that almost half the patients who could have been admitted were transferred somewhere else. When we followed those patients upstream to the specialist, they saw those patients, then they would discharge from the receiving hospital 70% of the time from the emergency department, not admitted. So what that means is they weren't sent for a procedure, but for cognitive care. And so we can move that cognitive care anywhere, anytime nowadays. So the real opportunity is to take the technology, not trying to use somebody else's technology, but technology designed for that doctor-patient interaction that drives healthcare. So, that's what I'm finding right now is that we have a lot of waste in the system. It's not timely. Transferring patients is not safe. It's not patient-centered. It's very expensive, and now we have a chance to do it right.
Let's talk about bringing the family in, because that's number 2 on your list of topics, comparing everybody's assessment of what we discussed earlier. You said the coordination of care and bringing the family in was important, Dr. Galli, and a lot of times the family helps make the healthcare decisions for the patient.
There's not much question. It really is not just patient-centered anymore as it is really family-centered. And we find this in the emergency department as well. The difficulty is that it's sometimes hard to be able to get the message to the family. It's sometimes hard to be able to get the unit together, if you will. And we really need to take advantage of that as best we possibly can. One thing that is, I think, quite significant that we see in the rural environment is that local people would love to be able to rely on their local hospital. They oftentimes know, however, that perhaps that's not the state of the art. And they become dependent on, or at least conflicted by, the concept of, do I need to travel hours to be able to get care? As Dr. Martinez had mentioned, if we can get out to them to be able to provide a definitive answer, that gives them the confidence that they have that they're getting quality care without having to leave home. Without being able to admit them locally rather than transferring them, knowing that they have the confidence in the right care decisions and that we can deliver that care right where they are. It's difficult enough to be admitted to the hospital. To have to travel hours and hours just to visit a loved one when you're trying to work and put kids in school makes it untenable.
Dr. Johnson, explain the process with a family there. Is that an easier situation for the physician to identify the problem and the treatment and whatever, or is that more difficult because now you have more minds involved?
I would always prefer the family there, because the family unit is what's important. You get so much more information from the family, and also the family unit's going to be the aftercare, and so the sooner that they come, the better history I get, the better interaction I get with the whole family unit. I get such a better idea of the dynamics of what's going to happen in the next hour or 2 or 3. And then the family's my ally. The family is my ally. So I actually, when I go into the room, if there's a family there, I often am introducing myself to the family first and then go to the patient, because that's where I'm going to keep my attention. But the family is paramount. I wouldn't want the family not to be there. And when the family isn't there, that's when I'm always struggling, because I frequently don't get a good history. I don't get a great picture of what's going on. And then I'm struggling at the end in the discharge portion to communicate what I want. And so the family is an ally to an ER physician, and the more family involvement, the better, especially with the elderly population. And it actually becomes quite interesting in today's world. It's not uncommon for me to be taking care of a 97 or 102-year-old, and the son is 84. And so I'm getting 2 and 3 generations in the room, which is wonderful. But sometimes I'm reaching down 2 generations to pull to my real allies.
I'll have to tell my son when he's 84, he's got to be there for me. Obviously, Dr. Carr, there are issues involved with providing information. Your experience, what's the sweet spot for providing information and getting information for the patient?
To the family?
Yes.
Well, so, I think that we have come a long way with this in medicine, and we went from the trusted friend of the family that delivers all the information whenever we can, to somewhere distant from that, where we were afraid of violating privacy, we were afraid of being too forthcoming, we were afraid sometimes of the potential malpractice risks associated with a conversation with the family. But the world that we live in now is a very transparent world, and this idea that we can somehow not be entirely forthcoming with information is, I think, an idea that has gone by now. I think that the next generation of physicians, practitioners of all sorts, are very much inclined to want to have as much transparency as they can with the family. And I think that means there's 3 big chunks. There's the piece before you seek care, right? So there's being able to reach out and contact your doctor from home, being able to find out whether or not you need to be in the emergency department, need to be taken to the doctor's office, need to be taken somewhere else. There's decision making when someone's in the emergency department at the time of their crisis. It would be nice to bring in the son from the West Coast, the daughter who's living in Europe right now, and have a conversation about mom and what's happening. And then on the back end, as others have referenced, there's really the discharge planning home piece. I mean, how our ability to send someone home is really limited on knowing what the resources are at home. The ability of a family member to care for a sick loved one at home is limited without understanding our take on what it is that's happening to them. So transparency is in my opinion, is already what patients expect when we're interacting with them. And I think this just changes our ability to be transparent. It puts us all in the same place at the same time to have the important conversation.
Well, families have often been located in the same location and can often do that, but then there are modern times and people go everywhere, so that family members are divergent. They're everywhere around the country, they're around the world, and really the only way to bring that information to them while they're all together is technology. And video conferencing obviously is one way to do that, but decision making is what I heard Dr. Carr talk about, making a decision on a patient, where that patient should go, if they should go to the emergency room. Isn't that an issue that perhaps technology can help resolve?
Absolutely. Imagine an application that most people could carry with them. Well, the device that they would carry it on would be their smartphone, their cell phone, and being able to get expert opinion whether or not the treatment or the direction that they need to go to is the urgent care or the emergency room. Or maybe it's an issue that the child shouldn't go to school today. And so a smartphone with its built-in camera, along with good software and a cloud architecture, how nice would that be if a mother or a father that's about to send their child to school and the child complains of a sore throat, that parent can actually look inside the throat with their camera, snap an image, and know that that image is securely transmitted to the school nurse, that the school nurse can decide and help that parent make the right decision, again at the right time, whether or not to send that child to school, or to go on and grab a prescription or a swab to check for something else in the throat. Today, we hear things about SARS, we hear things about different types of sickness that aren't the best, right. and they are communicable. And so to not send someone to school and get other kids sick is probably a good thing, or showing up for work and literally you shouldn't be showing up to work, and it's too late by that time. You've spread your this communicable system around. So imagine a system that would allow that to happen, and that's exactly what Mike and his team have been working on, is that type of system that is secure and is real time.
One of the major concerns about any personal healthcare information is that it's confidential, that it's private, that I don't have access to yours and you don't have access to mine unless there's some need to. How do we secure that? How do we prevent that kind of dispersion of information when it's not supposed to?
There are various ways, but we can build a secure cloud-based architecture so that moms or dads could actually log in with their own secret sauce type of password and know that they're secure. And when they're taking a picture, we actually encrypt it properly so that it meets the HIPAA standards. When it lands over at the other side for the nurse to look at, she knows that when she opens it up, it is safe and secure, and vice versa.
Yeah, and there are the issues that we're always going to see, and that is the invasion of private information by somebody who has an ulterior motive for getting that kind of information. The secure systems we're talking about, how secure?
About as secure as they can be in today's standards. As we go up in encryption, we can actually bring it out as wide as we can, and it slows things quite a bit down. Today's standard is pretty much 128-bit encrypted. We do everything in a 256-bit encryption, which vastly is more superior in the encryption rate.
One of the other topics that the doctors assessed and ranked was the in-transit care. You suggested earlier on, Dr. Martinez, that we're transporting a lot of people. Talk about the ambulances and the use of telemedicine to determine the care point and plan prior to the patient's arrival at the hospital. What could we benefit from if we just had it, if you had at the top of your wish list?
Well, we're experimenting with a lot of different ways to use the resources that we currently have. I mean, quite frankly, what's driving healthcare right now are issues of access, issues of quality, and issues of cost. And so technology hits all those. It allows us to have access easier. In fact, the whole 911 system allowed people to get rapid access when they used to not have access. But the problem of this now is cost, because they only get paid for transporting somebody. They don't get paid for caring for someone and leaving them there in the field where they're in their home. A lot of times they take care of people with asthma or other diseases, they get better, but in order for the physician to say you could stay, first off, there'd have to be a financial mechanism that allows them to do that. But secondly, the physician would really want to be able to evaluate that patient and remotely, and that's what telemedicine will allow them to do. There are other types of patients, like critical care transports, where you need to be in constant communication to see if there's any changes, or in some of the trauma cases to be able to see early on, because of long transit times, the severity of the crash, maybe some of the issues with the patient, images from the patient, so that those patients can be better cared for and treated.
Is this a complicated thing that we're talking about that would get in the way of treatment? In other words, I've got to communicate this while I'm trying to treat the patient at the scene, or what, Dr. Galli? What do you think? Do you think that we can utilize this technology in a way that it doesn't get in the way of, on-the-scene treatment?
I think you find that people won't use it unless it's seamless. We talked earlier about there being value to this. It's value in a lot of different ways. It's value to the provider, it's value to the patient, it's value to the paramedic if we're going to be using this in transport. It can't be something that's like Dr. Big Brother looking over my shoulder. It has to be something that augments the care. It's got to be something that helps the patient, helps the transport, and makes it work easily.
In discussions, obviously, that you have, Jordan, at the University of St. George University in Grenada, do they talk about how to deliver care in the emergency situation? Have you gotten through some of those issues and conversations?
I've not gotten there yet in school.
Okay. Well, I just thought perhaps that you might have discussed that in your classes, but you have worked in emergency rooms and have seen sort of firsthand some of this as it occurs, right?
Yeah. For example, you talked about transporting more people than need to be transported to the ER. If you get a lot at our hospital anyway, we get a lot of patients via AMBO with shortness of breath. and that can either be an asthma attack, COPD flare-up, or a PE, and deadly. So if you had like a video apparatus or one of these cameras, and the physician was able to see if there was a question, I mean, the EMTs can treat with, SVNs, DUONEBs, like right on the scene. If it's an asthma thing, COPD flare-up, they don't need to come to the hospital, especially via ambulance. So I think that would be huge.
We've mentioned, Dr. Carr, that you're on Crete or in Crete. I don't know what the correct terminology is. What purpose brought you to Crete? Why are you there?
The University of Pennsylvania is having a conversation with the University of Crete about sharing experiences, both research and clinical. But it is interesting, we spoke yesterday about the healthcare system here, the infrastructure, and how well they share their university resources with the smaller facilities, with the smaller hospitals on the island. And they are not connected in the way that we think they might be able to be. But the reality is, many of us in our university hospitals are not connected to all of the smaller community hospitals by us. It would be awfully nice if we could imagine a connected emergency care, a world of emergency care where, when I am seeing a patient who outstrips the skills, the resources, the capabilities of my hospital, that I can very quickly have access to expertise that I don't otherwise have access to. So what are the challenges here in Greece, or the challenges in the U.S.? I think that around the world we share this. We share the need to get the right knowledge to the patient wherever that patient might be.
We've obviously focused on the patient because that's the important thing, treating the patient. But the next most important factor should be the cost of that treatment. How do we save costs in treating patients in the emergency room?
Well, one of the really great studies came out of the Institute of Medicine that found that about 30% of the money spent in healthcare is actually wasted. And if you took that same money and redeployed it, you'd actually provide better quality care for a lot more people. In fact, probably all the people who right now can't get access. So clearly, efficiency is a big part of it, and being able to do things high quality but less cost is important. So some of the benefits we're seeing is with technology and the ability to get better collaboration, more rapid access to information, you're seeing the ability to improve, at least in the emergency department, patient flow. Because dispositions on things like mental health, which is purely cognitive, there's no procedures really involved, right? You can bring that in, not only from psychiatrists, but licensed social workers. You have a variety of other professionals who can come in and help make a disposition. Right now, it's a real problem for emergency medicine. People wait for hours, sometimes days, to get that disposition, and it stops the ER. It takes up a bed for someone who could use it, who's unseen, because ER is one of the few places patients come in sight unseen, and you have to try to get that flow there. The other thing that's important that we haven't talked about is that some of the problems we have that are really inefficient is that we lose capabilities when I'm constantly transferring patients away. I lose that knowledge, and so again, the Institute of Medicine looked at the learning system and looked at you can actually improve your capabilities. And so when they started doing stroke studies and doing telestroke, what you find is the calls go up early, then they start going down because you get better. And as Dr. Galli said, people have more trust in the hospital, but the doctors have more trust in their ability to take care of these things. And then there's also, we talked about just-in-time education. A lot of times people are transferred because I'm not sure. Maybe I want someone to look over my shoulder. I get that collaboration from someone else. Maybe it's an emergency physician, a colleague or someone. Maybe it's a nurse who needs another nurse to tell them how to take care of a chest tube or some device. We often get asked to change out devices. And so what you find is we can facilitate care at lower cost, faster, more patient-centered, more timely. So there's a lot of benefits. People first started looking at telemedicine to make more money with greater care, but we've got a shortage of providers and a lot more patients coming, and we can save a lot of money if we do it right.
I noticed, Dr. Johnson, you're nodding everything to what Dr. Martinez is talking
We all suffer
about.
the same problems, I'm telling you.
I know. So you're the chair of your emergency department, and you're pretty much in charge of that department, but there's a limitation to that. So how do you convince your administration that there is a real need for some of these changes?
Well, let me just go back to my philosophy of patient care. You always put the patient first. You always treat the patient as your family member or a family member, and then you put the team to make that happen. And that team now is suddenly very big. When we first started sending images to trauma centers, we knew that we were going to save lives. I knew that when I got my patient imaging to a trauma surgeon and a neurosurgeon, that I was going to get them on a helicopter a lot quicker where they need to go, and actually got them into the OR quicker and save lives. We knew that, and that was borne out. Now that was not too hard of a sell to the administration. But one of the spin-offs was exactly what you were mentioning. It's that teamwork. Suddenly my team is a lot bigger. Suddenly that neurosurgeon, we're talking with knowledge, we're talking about the same images together instead of, and suddenly my neurosurgeon is looking at me and saying, you know, Dr. Johnson, you can keep that patient there. Now that was quite a new paradigm to me. I was like, you're kidding me. I send all head bleeds to you. I have done this for years. Well, I've just looked at that head bleed, and that's so small that, you know, we're 8 hours into this. You don't need to send that. And I was like, great. Now so the spin-off was a much better team because we're all working together for the same thing. And the knowledge base of me, the ER sending physician, has gone up significantly because now I have firsthand communication with my neurosurgeons and other consultants with a lot more knowledge between us. My comfort level goes up, just like you were mentioning, with not only the community level feeling much more comfortable with coming into that community hospital and ER, but not only that, the ER physician feeling much more comfortable with what they're taking care of. So to get the buy-in of administration, once you see this happening, the buy-in is huge, and they can understand that they're keeping more patients. Just imagine how I feel when you were talking about the numbers. In Arizona, over 500 times a year, community hospitals were sending trauma patients to level 1 trauma centers, and they were discharged from the ER. What does that say to the patient that I put them on a helicopter and I tell them that my trauma surgeon says that they have to go down there, and they get down there and they're discharged from the ER? Do they want to come back and see me as a doctor? No. But now that doesn't happen anymore because I have that overlay of someone else. So what telemedicine does is it creates a much bigger team. And suddenly that patient now has a tertiary care center right around them, and they're 4 hours away from my institution.
Return on investment is often the phrase kicked around by administrators, by physicians who are looking at starting some sort of telemedicine program. So, for example, a telestroke program is probably the easiest one to show a return on investment because you've preserved the patient's independent living, perhaps, if you've gotten to that patient soon enough and started them on clot-busting drugs. But granted, given the other aspects of telemedicine in the emergency room, what is the return on investment that you see, Dr. Galli, that isn't specifically linked to telestroke?
Well, I think we talked about value before, and that is providing services, or the ability to provide services through specialty consultation in most cases, and actually specialty consultation as an emergency specialist. If you do not have a true emergency specialist somewhere, then you can provide that. And it's kind of almost antithetical to consider having an emergency medicine consultation, but indeed that's what's required in some cases. But additionally, you have our usual specialty consultations. And that for value for the patient, as all of the panelists I think have alluded to, is really something that telemedicine certainly does provide. It provides it sometimes to the extreme, to the point where sometimes the specialists are a little uncomfortable with where they're being placed and the amount of the workload that they have to do. I think what we're seeing is a transition of people recognizing that there is a whole different area of medicine that they can work with. And if you can appropriately be compensated for that additional care, then it works to everybody's advantage.
Appropriately compensated. That's a question mark at this point, because we don't know what really that means everywhere. The aspect of return on investment, though, we've had issues, or not issues, but we've had experiences with hospital facilities that have shown a dramatic return on investment just with one simple aspect of their program.
That's correct. We continually get information back from our sites where we install systems. And our goal is really to transform healthcare delivery through the innovation, through developing and integrating systems together, healthcare systems together, so that the access is there, the quality of care can be accessed to the patient, and then lower the costs in that process. And I'd like to do something a little different if I could. Sure. I'd like to just ask maybe one of the people here in the audience, Neil, Manuel, Ashley, Brad, and so on, Chris. You know, on ROI, you deal with it firsthand with customers. Do you have examples, Bisbee or any of those, VA?
If I may, I mean, we can definitely reference here in our own state in Arizona, example in Copper Queen Community Hospital, where they were able to implement a telemedicine program to address telecardiology, where they wanted to, the emergency room physicians wanted to have a second opinion before deciding to transport patients into Tucson. When they implemented that project, I believe it cost them total probably right around $25,000, and over the first 8 months they were able to eliminate transports that totaled $540,000 to the system. But what that also means to the hospital there themselves is they were able to keep those patients and monitor those patients internally. So the system saved, but they also were able to generate revenue by keeping the patient in their own facility. The emergency room physician felt comfortable about having that additional opinion, and then the patient was able to stay in their community with their family and friends and have that care locally. So that would be one example that would come to mind.
Well, and I know from that very example, thank you, Neil, that some of the things that we've heard since then from their new mayor, the old mayor was actually had a stroke and was treated over the system and was treated properly and has no disabilities literally from his stroke. But then the new mayor talks about something that I don't think is realized. Because now that emergency department that literally had only 2, maybe 3 modalities, now has 5, 6, 7, 8 modalities for teleburn, teletrauma, teledermatology, telestemy, telecardiac care, and so on, telepediatric care soon, is the ability for them to provide at that small regional facility to be able to provide care to their community. And the mayor said recently that they're seeing people stay in their community that would normally, when having a chronic type situation, leave the community and go back to the urban area. And so this has been very, very positive for this small community. I know she said also there are new businesses popping up because there's a comfort level with the ED department now because of all of the specialties, where in the past they just drove right past, 2 hours away to the urban center.
Dr. Carr, you're obviously from Pennsylvania, and that's a lot of people think that Pennsylvania is this big urban state, but there are a lot of rural areas in Pennsylvania that are probably underserved and need the specialty care that telemedicine can provide. Do you see that as well? Is that's an important factor in the future for healthcare in Pennsylvania?
It is for sure, and you're right. You know, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are the big cities on the ends. There are a couple very substantial cities and schools of medicine, academic medical centers peppered throughout the center of the state, Hershey and Geisinger and others. But the reality is there are a lot of areas that have limited contact with the mega referral centers. And there is increasing effort, I think, for those big centers to try to right-size themselves, right-size the system, right-size the small facilities, and be thoughtful about what we do about the finance, what we do about the reimbursement. Penn doesn't need to take every patient from the region and bring them to one of our inpatient beds. It doesn't make any sense for Penn. Penn should be there for the places, for the patients who can be cared for at the smaller facilities, and they should help to export some of the knowledge that exists at the giant university to the smaller facilities.
And I find that
It's
very
consistent with what everybody's saying. It's consistent for sure that this is a solution that is in the works. People are trying to figure out. But you're right. Someone talked about the financial barriers related to this. They are real. We haven't yet sorted out the financial side. There isn't yet, as you know, reimbursement for telehealth solutions in most situations. And people are doing what they can to try to make sure that it makes sense for most people.
You were going to add something, Rick?
Yeah, I was going to add, just because he made me think of it, people believe these big tertiary care centers are trying to suck all these patients down. That's not what I find when I talk to them. They're trying to get their patients out. It's very expensive to build a bed, and so they want to repatriate those patients back to the smaller facilities, and they want to obviate the unnecessary transfer that fills up their emergency department and duplication of cost. I think, Dr. Galli, Dr. Johnson, and others have talked about, and actually Jordan has already noticed it just in her time in the emergency department. These patients are coming in needing more help, but the thing is to get the right patient to the right place with the right resources at the right time, and that doesn't always mean moving the patient.
We've focused primarily on emergency departments as they exist in the United States, but there is obviously a need for emergency care around the world in locales that you normally wouldn't think of, but are just as remote as the farthest place on the planet, and those would be on oil rigs or in areas where a lot of mining is done. So, wouldn't telemedicine be of value in that area?
Absolutely. We have a team that focuses on energy, mining, and industry, and again, I can answer this, and I can add, maybe a little bit of value, but I think probably someone that could add great value, I just noticed came in, is Manuel Coelho, and Manuel is our business development global director, and maybe Manuel, better than me saying it, could you just share a little bit of what's happening globally as you see it and your team experiences it around the world?
Absolutely. I think that the pains that we see that we address internationally no different than here. It's just in different scales, depending on the country that we go, the environment that we serve. Our technologies today are meeting the needs of the population and their various needs. As Joe mentioned, one of the areas that we've seen growth this year is with energy mining infrastructure. So we had experience on oil platforms, seismic vessels, exploration vessels that have large populations, 200, 300, 400 people in those locations without any access to medical care. And companies are responsible for those lives. And they feel that telemedicine today is enabling these populations to go even farther. In the case of Brazil, for example, the new discoveries in the oil field, it's been very debated because in the past, a helicopter flight would suffice. Even though helicopters usually do not fly at night, they avoid putting the lives of the crew members at risk. Flying these helicopters to evacuate someone in the last few minutes is a very risky operation. But now it becomes even more risky as you have to take 2 or 3 helicopter flights until you reach 300 to 400 kilometers south and in the coast. So for viability of exploration, one of the major barriers is obviously the access to healthcare. And we are enabling this via telemedicine today. The same goes for mining companies. We have a few projects in Peru and Chile that we are serving populations, not only the employees of those mines, but the families and friends that actually follow these populations as well to remote areas. So enable these companies to go even farther out and be able to provide economic benefits to the location as well. So it goes above and beyond just caring for the employee. So corporate social responsibility also, it's a big topic.
Thank you, Manuel.
Very welcome.
You know, when you're talking about getting these products or these devices and technologies to remote locations, these can't be big things because they can't be transported readily or very well. So development must look at ways of miniaturizing products so that they can be just as useful but in a smaller package form.
We are right now striving to get everything smaller, obviously, whether it's going to be into a smaller handheld unit or even into our cell phones. Right now we're developing frameworks that are able to reduce the amount of time to develop a product into various disparate systems and still be very expandable as we start to grow into the different markets that we have right now.
Let me ask the doctors here, because they were privy to seeing some products that will not be on the market yet for a while. What would you like to see? What would you like to be able to utilize in your emergency department to better the patient care, to get more timely care, to bring the specialties into your department so that you can utilize their knowledge and their expertise? Let me start with Dr. Galli.
Well, I think we're privy to some examples of where GlobalMed is working in order to try to be able to get, almost direct patient care, direct patient involvement, ways to be able to communicate with healthcare providers to see whether or not they actually need to come in for care right away, or whether or not that can be handled in other ways. We talk about, quote, overcrowding of the emergency department. I would argue that people come to the emergency department because they currently don't have an alternative. It is the only form of care oftentimes, particularly if you're working two jobs, or particularly if your physician is appropriately scheduled so that they're full all day long and you have something acute. Ways to be able to enter the system in order to get some answers and to be a part of that process via smartphone, via applications, I think could be very helpful in order to get the appropriate amount of care at the appropriate place.
Dr. Johnson, any ideas on that? What you would like to see? Is there anything different than
to answer your question, first of all, I think that we've only scratched the surface on how we can use telemedicine in the emergency room. I think that that can be expanded greatly to create a better team, and that there's so much that we can do there. What we saw today in terms of systems where smartphones can be used with apps to HIPAA compliantly communicate to people that can give advice as to whether they need to come to the emergency room to the first place or where they need to go or what they need to do, I think has limitless possibilities. There's just no question in my mind, both nationally and internationally. And we're becoming such smartphones most everyone has, and just using what they have and are used to, and certainly the new generation. And actually, to be honest, it's being used now. As you guys have seen my son showing me pictures of his laceration and asking me whether he should have it sewed or not, and I agreed. And we all followed his care this weekend over text, over just pictures. But to be able to do that HIPAA compliantly, and to be, I get rashes sent to me all the time asking me my opinion of them. And to be able to do that HIPAA compliantly with the right people at the right time, with the right information, gets the amount of waste that we can prevent with, and time. Michael was just talking about the time you spend in an ER that you didn't actually, if you didn't need to be there, what could you be doing during that time? And so I think just designing a system such that people can get fairly instant information from the right people and feel comfortable with it, and then be triaged appropriately as to where they can best be cared. That will revolutionize healthcare.
Well, I see my job as a physician is to make decisions, and either by myself or in collaboration. So I need one of those giant easy buttons, because it is just so much work to get what you need, trying to track people down, trying to find a way to collaborate. And so as we've moved toward images, we've moved toward the ability to share values and information, it makes it that much better. I do want to kind of switch topic just a little bit. I got humiliated today when Jordan, I explained that I had learned to ultrasound this last year, and so at the break she said, gosh, why didn't they teach you that in med school? And the answer was they didn't invent it until after I got in med school, okay? So thank you very much. So it makes me want to ask Jordan a question, which is what kind of work environment would you want to be in? Because my residents now pick their job often based upon the electronic medical records in that hospital. They will work with some, they won't work with others. So what you're working as a scribe, so where do you see kind of some of the pain points for the physicians you work with, and what kind of environment would recruit and retain physicians or people of your generation as you come down the pike, you think?
A work environment utilizing what we already have, technology, especially going back to the imaging, sharing images. We've had like a number of burn patients that we don't see burns often, whereas at COPA, they have the burn center and they see them all day long. So it's just a simple picture sent over there, HIPAA compliant, of course, would determine whether or not they have to be transferred. It's just like little things that make so much sense, and they're simple if you think about it, but I don't know, it would be a lot easier. If you guys could get this all figured out before I become a physician, that would be great.
What about, I don't want to leave Dr. Carr out of this conversation. We've gone around the room a couple of times, but we mentioned that it's important for physicians to be in contact with other physicians. What about the importance of spreading knowledge that comes with that interaction between clinicians?
Yeah, it's great, thanks. So some of the work around critical illness that we have done using a telehealth solution at our shop, I am on both ends. I'm on the consultant end, doing work around cardiac arrest and severe sepsis, where I'm at home or in my office or somewhere else, and my phone dings and tells me that they would like some perspective, some help, some coaching. And I, get my hotspot out and get my laptop out and start into the dialogue with, very often, one of my partners is there, a faculty member who's comfortable resuscitating this, but has 40 patients that they're taking care of like that. And I have one-to-one time now with this resident for an hour, 90 minutes, whatever it takes to get this patient as resuscitated as they can possibly be before we send them to the guys. And for me, I feel like it's the right thing to do, bringing my skill set to the patient. And for the resident, it really, I think, they really enjoy the one-on-one teaching. And it has made me think, it's made me think two things. The first thing it makes me feel very, very isolated when I'm not in the room. When I get a phone call and they just have a couple of questions, I'm acutely aware of how different it is when I'm virtually in the room. I can see the nurse, I can see the monitor, I can see the vent, I can see what's going on, and I have all the unspoken stuff that happens when you take care of a patient. You're back in the mix, and you feel like it. You're in the mix, and you know that you're there. That's the first piece. I become acutely aware of when I'm not virtually in the room, when I'm just on the telephone. But the second piece is it really makes me wonder about what we ought to be doing moving forward around education using this modality. Dr. Martinez and I spoke before when you brought up his ultrasound example. But people had to learn ultrasound over the last couple of decades, folks who didn't learn it in residency. How did they learn it? They took a course, they picked it up a little bit here, a little bit there. Rick happens to be in an academic medical center. They probably have an ultrasound fellowship and a couple of folks that are specialty trained in it. In a community hospital, it's a much different thing. And I can just see a day where whatever the next skill set is that we have to learn, and there will be another one, education doesn't stop, residency ends. Whatever the next skill set is, you will take the class for a couple hours, but then when the class is over, you will then be coached, mentored through the next couple dozen cases that you do in real time with someone who has expertise in that domain, so that you become an independent practitioner in that specific skill set again. This isn't about finding a solution, delivering a specialist to do for the emergency care provider. It's about sort of finding the right mix between what we should be doing on our own and when should we be calling for the capital.
Exchange of information is really that important. You wanted to say something about
Oh, no, what's interesting there too is to provide care in many locations and where the care is needed, the emergency physician isn't always there. And so, nor the specialist for that matter. And to be able to have remote abilities for a clinic with maybe a PA, an MP, or a low med tech to have access to the primary care or an emergency physician if it would be necessary, and then to be able to be directed via telemedicine. For instance, if a line had to be placed and they were having trouble, they could use a vascular ultrasound or an abdominal ultrasound, and often that lower level may not have as much experience as these gentlemen and the emergency physicians or the radiologists, and to be able to actually do that via telemedicine and be directed from that expert on the other side, giving that peace of mind also to the person with the patient giving the care right then and there. I know that's working really well within the VA. And so they have that physician overlooking them and helping guide that consult.
And as far as this company is concerned, GlobalMed, just being able to sit down with experts like these gentlemen and soon to be Dr. Jordan there, what does that mean? What benefit do we get from sitting down and talking to these people and knowing what they're doing?
It's priceless because, again, we don't practice medicine. We practice technology, and to know what works for them and what they want to see work could be a simple change in our user interface, could be a simple change in the quality of image. And so it's immeasurable, the amount of value that we get out of this, and I can't thank the good doctors and soon to be enough, because it really does help us, it guides us. And without their input, we're just a bunch of technology hacks.
I saw Mike shaking his head about the idea aspect, getting ideas that maybe you hadn't considered.
Feedback from doctors who are in the field give us, the feedback is priceless, it really is. And I don't think we could even go anywhere if we didn't have the feedback from these type of experts that we have, and soon to be Dr. Magruder.
And then maybe our Director of Product Management back there, bring her in for a second. Did you get feedback?
Well, we do, but I actually have a question for the doctors, if I might. There's been a lot of discussion here today about collaboration between GlobalMed and the medical community, between ER doctors and the specialists, between residents and doctors, patients and families. So how do you, as industry thought leaders, encourage this buy-in and demonstrate the value to leverage this technology and drive this efficient collaboration? How do we do that? How do we move forward?
I'll take the first shot at it.
All right.
There you go. You know, what I find is that a lot of this IT is very foreign to physicians. Physicians actually adopt technology a lot. We talked about ultrasounding. We've got physicians taking out gallbladders by going through your stomach. We've really putting probes in your brain. So they really adopt technology a lot. The problem with IT in many ways is that it's not being designed in collaboration with physicians kind of at the bedside. And so we've seen this with electronic medical records. We've seen it with other things coming down the pike. It doesn't fit into their workflow, so that it's not easy to adopt. So really what we're finding now is that it's almost two things coming together. One is that the best way to get rid of inefficiencies is sometimes to redesign your workflow and eliminate unnecessary steps. What we're doing is we're finding that increased collaboration, which is the goal, to provide better care, comes from some of these technologies, and the technologies get redesigned to help you do what you want to do. You know, in the old days being what, 3 to 5 years ago, if I wanted to use the technology that came in from my electronic information, I had to have a different password for each system. I had to go into a PACS system here, I had to go electronic medical record here, get my lab somewhere else. They started designing it where I can just go and get what I need. One of the biggest problems we see is too many layers and too many menus to get the information I need. I just need what I need when I need it because I'm moving quickly. And so that interface becomes critically important. And I've seen that with GlobalMed. We found some of the software was too sequential, became parallel, one step adding another. And what we're finding is that when they originally used the equipment, for example, for telestroke, once people realized what you could do with it, they began to use it in ways it wasn't originally bought for, but they actually found they could do things like get the behavioral health person online. They could get the doctors upstairs, not in another city, but just to give a disposition for his patient. So what we're finding is that people are beginning to become more comfortable with the technology, and as a result, the adoption's coming up. But I think we've got to do a much better job on both sides.
And Joel, just to indirectly kind of go back to your original question here, thank you, Dr. Martinez. It's that kind of feedback that myself and my team do here on a daily basis that is absolutely critical to allowing us as an organization to move forward. Because as you mentioned previously, we're not specialists. We're not ER doctors. So we rely and we require that input from you in order to better our products and to improve the workflow, to stimulate that moving forward.
Well, I have to make this one comment because it's a great little story, but physicians want to see it in a clinical context and they want to know what's in it for them. How does this help me do my job? So CPOE is something that was mandated by everybody, but it's a good idea in many ways, computer physician order entry. Well, I actually went to a hospital where they started with it on the 3rd floor. So what happened was that floor became empty. No doctors would admit to that floor, right? So then they made it on all the floors, and what the physicians would do, they would get on the floor, and then they'd pick up a phone and they would call the nurse and give verbal orders because they didn't want to interface with that computer because it just was too much work. In the end, they redesigned the system. But what made it good for the physicians was when they started realizing that they could now track what was happening better. They could get it on their mobile phones, right? The information was now movable. And then the most important thing is when they did prescriptions, you could tell whether that patient picked it up or not. And so you started seeing compliance to your great care plans. So again, framing these things in terms of what we're trying to accomplish helps with the physician adoption.
I think user-friendly is the key. Doctors it's all time and it's all simple. We want it to be simple, we want it to be time efficient, we want to be able to use it, and once we know that, you'll get buy-in. And once there's buy-in, because your question was more than just the physician, once there's the initial physician buy-in that's using it, and then the consultant buy-in, which comes fairly quickly, that buy-in is a slow process because once, these 2 centers are doing it. Now these other centers see that they're doing it. And, it was interesting being at the conference this year, bumping into a neurosurgeon that I'd used for a long time saying, well, gosh, all this stuff exists. And I said, it's at your hospital. We use this all the time. Didn't you know that? So there's that buy-in. And then finally, the families, they love it. I mean, the families, and you should see them crowd around that tele thing. They want to get in the picture. So there's buy-in all the way around, and then that buy-in just becomes bigger buy-in as more people see and know because people love new technology.
I think it's important to understand that telemedicine is a process. In this panel, we have both industry and clinical leaders, people in the forefront of telemedicine. But we need to bring on the rest of the fold. The Mississippi experience, I think, has been a pretty good one. About 12 years ago, we came up with this concept, 2 years in development, but then 10 years in doing it. When we first started, faculty and residents were horrifically opposed. They're taking away physician jobs. You've got this bizarre technology that makes no sense. How can I possibly see patients on TV, and will they even tolerate it? And yet, as time has gone by, and it may be because there's now a different breed of new physicians, they are embracing this technology. They're embracing this new way to be able to take care of people. I think we have to be patient with it. We have to be understanding of it. And I think both sides, both the industry and the clinicians, need to be able to communicate continuously in order to make it functional for both sides.
Any thoughts from you, Dr. Carr?
Besides sleep.
I would just echo what other folks have said. I mean, you can never go wrong. They teach you this very early in medical school. You can never go wrong if you do what's right for the patient. And what we know is that this generation of patients, that all of us feel connected to our technology, and we want answers. We want access to the providers that we need. And so if we empower the patients by getting them the specialists that they need, getting them the emergency provider that they need, giving them the judgment that they need from home, giving them a little bit of a boost after they've been discharged from the hospital, we all win. It's what we all expect. In every other domain of our life, I like to do my banking. I like to, when I'm traveling, Skype my kids. I like to feel connected, and I think that's what folks can't go wrong if we can provide that product for them.
Well, I'm happy that we were able to begin at least this discussion and hopefully to continue it as well, because collaboration in the future will be important, because we just can't take any more chances with healthcare. We have to design systems that work, and they work for the patient. I want to thank our panel here today, Dr. Brendan Carr, who joined us from Crete. Thank you very much. Dr. Robert Galli, Dr. Phil Johnson, Dr. Richardo Martinez, and on the GlobalMed side, Joel Barthelemy and Mike Harris. I'm Roger Downey. I hope you've enjoyed this program, and please contact us if you have any questions or suggestions, because we are going to continue to do more of these collaborations. I also want to say thank you to Jordan Magruder for being with us as well, because she is the next generation of healthcare providers. Thank you very much.